Welcome to episode 108 of the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. Baseball is back, at least we think. Still got a little ways to go. Just a little under a month until baseball is expected to be back in late July, just slightly before the NBA made their plans to return, or has their return slated there in late July. So we'll hopefully be getting both of those sports back at the same time after months and months and months of mind-numbing negotiation. I don't even know if you want to call it negotiation with how, unwilling each side was to compromise, but here we are. They have reached a conclusion. I won't call it a compromise because, again, Rob Manfred did have to institute his power as commissioner, but it was more than 50 games. So if that makes you think it was some sort of compromise, I guess you can have that. But the bottom line is there's plans for baseball to return. Still some things to iron out. The Toronto Blue Jays, I brought it up before on the podcast. They're still, as of now, looking for their home in 2020. I know they said they're going to make an announcement sometime this weekend, but as of right now, when we're recording, they still have not made it known where they'll be playing. And that's a big deal because, they're in the Orioles division. And we'll be going into all the details of MLB's plans to return. Since we didn't have the most to talk about this week, and I saw this pop up from the Ravens yesterday, in honor of the team turning 25 this year, or celebrating its 25th anniversary, they are doing a fan poll on the Ravens website to vote for the all-time team. So there's multiple choice for each position group. I voted on it yesterday, but we're going to go through it on the show. Some of them are really, there's no debate for some of the position groups, but some of the other ones, I thought either the options were interesting, leaving certain people out, or just there's a debate to be had of who you would pick. So we'll go through that since we have the time, and then we'll wrap things up. But before we get going, the last couple weeks we've been talking quite a bit about Mo Gabba on the show, and I wanted to quickly promote this because this is going to be a really, really big deal. I'm super excited about it coming up later this week. If you're a listener of 105.7 The Fan, you already know who Mo Gabba is, one of the most loyal listeners of sports talk radio, just probably in the world. At such a young age, he's been listening to sports talk radio, and 105.7 The Fan in particular, being a Baltimore kid, a Ravens and Orioles fan. And if you know, Mo's gotten a recent diagnosis that's not so good, but the outpouring of support and love that has come from that has been just tremendous, and the donations and everything, the parades, all the well wishes and messages from athletes, not just in Baltimore but around the country. It's been awesome. And this Thursday, I'm so happy to announce that the Fan is going to be giving Mo Gabba a night to host his own radio show. This is a dream of his. As I said, being such a big fan of sports talk radio, he's always dreamed of hosting his own show, and he's going to have the chance to do that on Thursday night, this Thursday, July 2nd, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. As of now, although I don't, if we're booking a bunch of guests here. I can tell you, I won't give it away, but I've been in talks with some people about getting guests lined up, and we've got 2 locked in already, and they're both Orioles related, I'll tell you that, but I can't give too much away. We kind of want to keep some of it a surprise, or at least wait until closer to the show to announce this stuff. But it's gonna be huge. We're might have to go past 9 p.m. with how many people we have, so we'll see how it goes. But if you're not in the Maryland area, you're not in the listening range of the Fan on your radio, you can listen to it on the radio.com app, radio.com on your desktop computer. There's plenty of ways to listen, so I would highly encourage you all to check that out on Thursday. I know Mo's going to be just he's already super excited about this, but last night at work I got to take a sneak peek at some of the the rejoins that they made specially for the show, imaging and stuff like that you hear on the radio, show intros and stuff like that, and they made a handful of them for Mo, and they just sound amazing. They sound awesome. It really is going to be his own show for 3 hours. So I wanted to promote it on here. I'm excited to be behind the board for that on Thursday, and if you have the time to listen, to drop in for a little bit on Thursday night, there's going to be just a ton of guests. You won't want to miss it, so check it out if you can. All right, let's get into the baseball talk. As I said, we have reached a conclusion to this, what I described as a roller coaster last week. Seemed like it wasn't going to end anytime soon. Just 2 weeks ago, I was ranting and raving, saying there's no way baseball is going to come back. I just didn't see it happening. And as of now, it looks like it's going to come back. We have a 60-game season that will be starting in late July. Teams will be getting back together here in early July to start preparing in what we're calling a spring training 2.0, so to speak, although because of the coronavirus and the pandemic, there will be much more restrictions in place than your average spring training. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see how that works out. But the wheels will begin to get in motion very soon. And I believe all teams are just going to be operating out of their home ballpark when they're training. The Orioles will not be in Sarasota. The teams will just not be in Florida, won't be in Arizona where they normally have their spring training. They'll be at their home ballpark. Very minimal amount of people there, going to cut down on the amount of people that are just around the facility. I'm sure media is going to be held back quite a bit. It's going to be something that we have to figure out as we go, because right now it's a lot on our plate just to digest. But to go into the season, again, 60 games, 40 of them will be played in your division, the remaining 20 against your American League or National League counterparts. So for the Orioles, they will be playing those other 20 games against the NL East. So that is the Nationals, the Phillies, the Braves, and the Marlins. That is that division. And I'm probably forgetting a team there. But playing teams that are regionally close to you is the point here, to cut down on travel.
I think the Mets was the one you were missing.
There we go. That's the team.
You know what Mets stands for?
What's that?
My entire team sucks.
And honestly, yeah, with how bad the Orioles are, it's probably the Marlins are the only team they're going to have go into a matchup feeling like, hey, we can really win this game. Because the rest of it's probably going to...
Maybe the Red Sox, dude. I mean, look how bad the Red Sox hitting's good. The Red Sox pitching staff is horrible.
Yeah, and they're without Chris Sale this year, so a lot will be revealed, I think, in the 60-game season. But I know we did, and we'll just go into it now because there's so much to get through here, but this raises an interesting point. We joked in the past about having a 50-game season or a shortened season and potentially expanded playoffs, although that was not agreed upon for this. There are some rule changes we are going to get into, but expanded playoffs was not one of them. It's still going to be 5 teams per league this year, the typical division winners plus a wild card team or wild card teams. So that's as normal. But we joked around about if the Orioles could get hot and maybe sneak into the playoffs. I think we agreed it was still a long shot, but now it's seemingly back to impossible. You don't have expanded playoffs, and you're playing 40 games against your own division with the Yankees. And the Red Sox may not have the pitching, but their hitting will probably decimate the Orioles' pitching. And the Blue Jays, I mean, their young talent is just, they can hit. They got some pretty...
Tampa Bay's really good, too.
Tampa's, honestly, they should be competing with the Yankees for the division crown, in all honesty.
Yep.
And definitely for a wild card spot. So, yeah, I mean, the Orioles' chances were not high, even with some of these different rule changes, but now they're back down to non-existent. And I did see the odds. This is from Odds Shark. I just looked it up real quick. Their over-under for the season. Win total is set at 21.5.
Maybe they could go like 25 and 35. I was looking up for fun. They were 19 and 41 after 60 games last year. 19-41, and after 60 games in 2018, they were also 19-41. And ironically enough, Dylan Bundy was the winning pitcher in both of those games. So that's kind of some weird juxtaposition. But yeah, that 19.5 is probably fair, right? I mean, you figure they'll scratch in 10 games against each of the divisions. They'll probably win 4 against a couple teams, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm being over optimistic, but I think it'll be fun. I'm excited. I think this is a format that at least, like, you know, you start out like 7-3, and then you're like, yeah, we're in it, baby, we got a shot. So I think this is not that, you know, Orioles fans should be over the moon excited, like this is going to be a guaranteed playoff team, but it would be cool to see them kind of hanging around in August and September, ironically, knowing that the season started super late. But I think that'll be cool, a nice bridge to hopefully get us to what's an uninterrupted NFL preseason and regular season. So
the one thing we don't have is a concrete schedule. I know the NBA just announced theirs last night. Hopefully baseball will have theirs soon because we're going to have to figure out travel and whatnot, whereas the NBA is everyone's operating in the same area, so there's no travel concerns. But Major League Baseball is going to have to put that schedule together sometime soon. And we'll see. I mean, the amount of off days is going to be cut down significantly. Trouble is, if and it's going to probably happen. I mean, it's bound to happen. It happens so many times during a normal season where rain comes in and you got to schedule a makeup day, but we don't have as many off days here in this shortened season. So, hopefully the weather doesn't have too big of an impact, but you're going to see probably a lot of doubleheaders if that's the case. And that would be probably the easiest thing to do is a doubleheader, but I don't know what they would have to do beyond that if the doubleheader doesn't work.
What would your thoughts be on with the shortened season and less off days if doubleheaders are necessary? I think they've discussed this in the past, doing like 2 7-inning doubleheaders or 2 6-inning doubleheaders, something along the lines of that. So at least it's not as much baseball in such a short period of time. Do you have any, like, do you think that's stupid? Do you how would you react if that's what they started doing?
I think that's ridiculous. And even for a season like this, and I know we'll get into the extra inning rules, which a lot of people, and myself included, think is intrusive enough. I think shortening the game lower than 9 innings would be just so stupid. I mean, why would you do it? I mean, the only thing you're trying to do is cut down on the amount of wear and tear, but you're only playing a 60-game season. And if we were operating under normal circumstances, I don't want them touching the game or tampering the game to that level in the first place. I mean, we already sit here and have to have a debate over stuff like a pitch clock, which really, compared to something like what you said, is not a big deal at all. But I mean, I don't think we're even – I don't want to have that conversation ever about shortening from 9 innings. Like I said, I think this extra inning rule is ridiculous. But really quick on the Orioles schedule, I think you raised a good point. Not just the Orioles, any team for that matter. If you open up, winning 7 or even more of your first 10 games, 7 or 8 of your first 10 games, I mean, what does that do for the clubhouse energy? I mean, does that just give you a shot in the arm and now you're saying, well, hold on. I mean, maybe we weren't projected to be a playoff team this year, but we just opened up on a hot streak and now we're energized. Now there's this, this vibe running through the clubhouse that, hey, maybe we can do it. And I think that would create, an interesting scenario. So if that's the Orioles, I would be extremely excited for that. I know a couple people have brought up the why not season that is so famous in Orioles history that was a 162-game season. I'm sure that team was projected to be better than the 2020 Orioles are, but at the same time, in a shortened season, why not? Let's bring it back. I mean,
That's right. I mean, all it, like you said, man, all it takes is a good stretch of 20 games. Now, I'd have to look it up, and I will for the show next week. What was their best 20-game stretch last season? Did they have a stretch where they were able to go 13-7 or something like that? Probably not, but it's possible that they played some decent baseball for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. We know they didn't play very much good baseball, so I think it might be hard to find, but like you said, I mean, all it takes is, hey, let's say John Means and Alex Cobb are both healthy and they both have very good seasons. I mean, it's feasible to think that, if those two guys in 60 games will get, 12 starts?
Probably less than that.
Well, just considering there's 5 in the rotation, that was just a top of the head guess. I don't know if they'll have 6 in the rotation this year or what the game plan's going to be. They might go with an opener some games, I'm sure, like they did last year. But those two, for me, are really the only, surefire starters. I could see them getting 10 or 12 starts each. What if they both pitch to, sub-3 ERAs, have big years, or just under 3.5? I mean, that gives you a shot. And I think we spent a lot of time talking about this last year. They don't have a terrible hitting team. They're not consistent. But, when they get rolling, they can really hit pretty well. I'm not one of the, top teams in the league, but I feel like their biggest struggle has always been on the mound, at least these past few seasons. And they've had some hitters that put together nice seasons. And, when you start to piece together a lineup, it sucks to lose Mancini, which I think we'll realize pretty quickly. But I don't think it's a talentless hitting lineup. So if they get some decent pitching, it's possible, right?
Yeah, and there's some young guys you obviously want to get a look at. I know Mountcastle's going to be definitely a guy you're locking into the taxi squad, or potentially even he might even make the major league team. I don't know, with the space they have. Mancini obviously not being there. You got rid of Jonathan Villar. Those were your 2 best hitters from last year are not going to be here this year. That's a huge shot, but we got plenty of young guys that we liked. Santander, Hanser Alberto was just a singles machine last year. But do you have the guys that can drive them in?
They got Renato Nunez coming back too, right?
Yeah. He's a guy that could give you some power.
Didn't he hit 30 bombs last year, or am I making that up?
No, I think he did.
Or he was really close to it. And listen, Chris Davis, man, he can have a 60-game stretch. I'm getting stoked for Orioles baseball, man.
The more you talk yourself into it, right?
Yeah, I might go to the Charlestown Casino and put some money on the Orioles to make the playoffs.
Oh, man. Start with the over.
Come on, let's get wild. 31 ding-dongs for Renato Nunez, but he hit 244. He's like the new age Mark Reynolds.
I'll take it. You need a guy like that.
Remember when the Orioles used to have 5 guys like that on the same team?
When they had
it's cool. We're just going to hit 1,000 home runs and not get on base.
They had a beer league softball lineup, not a baseball team. So
what a group, man.
But yeah, Chris Davis is an interesting guy to look at because he did have a good spring, but now he's had all this downtime. You wonder what kind of impact that's going to have. I just feel bad because from the mental standpoint of it, we all agreed that having a good spring was just nothing but positive for him. It's not a guarantee he's going to carry that over into the regular season, but this downtime, I would guess, really hurts that. I don't know how active any of these guys have been, taking cuts, if they're able to get to some sort of batting cage. If any of them, like Chris Davis, have one at their home, I don't know. How much practice have you really had? So I just felt bad for Davis because, again, if there was a chance, if any time there was a chance for him to break out of this, I think it would have been this year, considering how good of a spring training he had. But in a shortened season, we'll see what happens. I mean, again, it's one of those things where if he gets off to a decent enough start, maybe hits a couple bombs, or he's just not striking out as much, he's making good contact, that tells him, hey, I'm feeling good about this. Whereas last year he opened up on an 0 for 20 something?
0 for 50? No, it was worse. Wasn't it like 0 for 48 or something? Or maybe that was after he snuck in a hit. but he had like the longest hitless streak, I think, in maybe ever.
Mm-hmm. So that's what we're just trying to avoid that, get a hit in that first series, just eliminate any possibility of that sort of depressing streak of happening.
Hey, have they mentioned anything about fans at these games? I'm assuming that's a no, but I don't remember seeing anything explicitly outlined that they either would or would not be allowed to go.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything concrete like negating it or the league telling teams they can't have it. From what I saw, and it just made me laugh because, again, through this whole negotiation process has been, from the owner's perspective, all about money because they're going to be losing all this money because fans aren't going to be there. And they kept saying, well, we need some way to make up this money. We can't pay you your full salary, blah, 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 all that. And as soon as a deal got approved here and we had our plans to resume, some of the owners came out and they're like, well, how can we figure out how to get fans in the stands? It's like, well, you jerks, this entire time you're negotiating on the main basis that you're not going to have fans in the stands. And as soon as you reach a deal, you come out and say, well, how can we get some fans in the stands? Like, you slimy greaseballs. That's all I'll say. But right now, I think they're leaving it open to the possibility. But my guess is that no team would really seriously want to go through with that. You don't need it. I think we've already conceded that with a shortened season, we're going to play. We're going to make our money as much as we can from the postseason, make what you can in the regular season. But trying to bring fans into the mix at this point, I think would just be complicating it for no good reason. Just punt on it and come back next year and full force, hopefully as normal in 2021.
One other quick note on the Orioles. Does Keegan Aiken start this year for the Orioles?
Yeah, the taxi squad is an interesting case with what prospects make it. I mentioned Mountcastle earlier. He's, again, I don't know what Brandon Hyde and Mike Elias want to do with him, but from a service time perspective, he was going to come up this year at some point. I think he's definitely a lock for the taxi squad. Be one of those guys that can be essentially called up to the major league roster, although they won't be playing a minor league season. He will be playing major league games this year. Beyond him, I just don't know. I mean, we knew Austin Hayes was going to be here. He's probably going to be a starter. You're starting DJ Stewart. Those are guys that have already been up significantly. But beyond that, I don't know.
Cedric Mullins should be up too. I mean, you can't imagine you hope he plays his way into a role on this team.
Right, and it's at a certain point, it's a majority of it is talent. I mean, that's first and foremost. Who's actually good enough to be there? But with no minor league season, at least right now, there's nothing for minor leaguers going on. Mike Elias kind of has to be strategic here in who he puts on this taxi squad, who will have a chance to be used at the major league level. And yeah, there's a lot for them to iron out, and I'll trust him on that because really beyond Mountcastle, I don't really have anyone that I'm eager to see.
I imagine if they're going to be on this taxi squad and they're going to play in some games, like would that start their clock, or would that group basically count as a September call-up? I'm not sure how any of those details work, but I definitely think Mountcastle and Aiken are guys that I expect to be on the regular roster. I would be kind of disappointed if they were just taxi squad or leftover guys, at least for me personally. I'm not sure about Grayson Rodriguez, DL Hall, a couple of the other Orioles pitching prospects. Probably not quite ready yet, but they could be on the taxi squad, or maybe they are used in relief a little bit. Stoked to watch Hunter Harvey. I mean, this team is not that disappointingly boring in this 60-game format. Like, I'm low-key excited about it, I'll be honest.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's what baseball wants right now. You're excited, you're engaged. I think there's a lot of variables with the taxi squad and service time. From what I understand, if you're placed on the taxi squad, your service clock does not start until you actually play a major league, or you make a major league start. That's what I heard from Steve Molesky. So I will appeal to him on all of that. He's absolutely tuned in and in the know with all of that. He's came on Jeremy's show last night, helped myself and all the listeners kind of iron out any questions we had of how the season's going to work. So listen to him. We posted that clip on the fan website, by the way. So if you want to, I can't really regurgitate everything he said because it sort of confuses me. But if you want any of your questions answered, I would check that clip out, and I'll forward all of our listeners to that as well because he did a great job of breaking it down and explaining it. So he did say that I think the deadline is tomorrow, is this Sunday, for them to put together the taxi squad. Or if not tomorrow, it's very soon. So we will have our group of guys set shortly, I think. So next week's show will probably be talking about that and maybe the schedule if we have it by that point. So next thing I had here was some of the rule changes because we didn't have an expanded postseason. I thought that was very likely, but it ended up not making the cut. But the one thing that was talked about quite a bit that ended up being put in stone is the universal DH. At least for this year, the National League will be using a DH as well, just to cut down on some wear and tear on the pitchers. I think it makes sense.
I'd like that to become permanent.
Yeah, I think most American League fans wanted it to become the norm. I understand where people come from when they want, pitchers to still hit. But it's the one thing about baseball that I think is one of the stupidest things about baseball is how you have half of your league abiding under one rule and the other half of your league under another. I mean, it would be like the NFL. I'm trying to think of the equivalent in the NFL. Like if
you could have 5 downs on 4 possessions or something like that.
Yeah, it's some
silly example, but that would be the only thing I could think of that would be close to that. Plus, there have been some pretty good pitchers that have gotten hurt running the bases over the years. And to be frank, if you're a pitcher and you still want to hit, then be good enough to hit, and be Shohei Ohtani. That. I know that that's not as easy as it looks, but there's no reason for pitchers to be hitting. I don't get it. Baseball fans and baseball purists, they really confuse me sometimes. I don't for the life of me get why they have to hit in the National League. I think it's stupid. I hope that rule sticks, and in the future, we don't have to watch. Because how many of the pitchers are good hitters? 5, maybe.
So yeah, that's the thing is the argument always comes up to they show you Bartolo Colon's home run from I don't know what year that was, 2016 or something, so maybe 2017. I don't know. It was one of his most recent years in the league. He hit one down the left field line at the Padres ballpark, and it was just and
it was magical.
Oh yeah, I mean that's one of my favorite baseball moments in recent history. But that comes in between Bartolo swinging out of his shoes and having his helmet fall off every time he swings the bat.
Right.
It's just, and all the American League pitchers that go and when they play at a National League ballpark and would have to hit, they're just standing there, trying not to look stupid.
Yeah, you're an out. That's what you are at that point.
Exactly. Or maybe you can lay down a bunt if you manage to get someone on before you. It's a waste.
And I also think, and this could be a bit of a stretch and just me not being as big a baseball guy as everyone else, doesn't it kind of make the league look bad when Bartolo Colon hits a major league home run? I watched that and I think that made hitting a baseball look way too easy, which I know it's not. I'm not saying that it is, but people who bash baseball could see that and think, maybe this isn't as difficult as they make it out to be.
I think it says more about the pitcher than the sport. And I think it just goes to show you how much of a supreme athlete Bartolo Colon is.
I love that explanation. Anytime you can use the terminology supreme athlete and Bartolo Colon in the same sentence is a big win.
Well, we're still waiting on his return to Major League Baseball. I don't think it's going to happen. Unfortunately, I want him to be on the Orioles. I quite frankly, would settle for any team at this point, although I know we're both pulling hard for him to join the O's. This year, it's just not looking like it's in the cards for Bartolo in 2020. But 2021, he's coming back. He's coming back strong. So I'll keep my fingers crossed. The other big rule change is the one that's actually causing debate, is the extra innings rule. And this, I think it makes sense. I still don't like it, but I think this makes sense for 2020. You're playing so many games jam-packed with no off days. In the event that you're going to have some rain cancellations and you're going to have to play double headers, I can understand why you would want to do anything you can to avoid these insanely long games that pop up a couple of times every season. Just last year, the Orioles found themselves in, a 16-inning game against the Angels. You know, they're
in California that you were working.
That a 10 p.m. start East Coast time ends up going 16 innings. So I would like to avoid that again, and I know the teams would too, because again, not even 16 innings. I mean, you get 14, 13 even. I mean, that's really taking a hit on your bullpen. So without many off days, I get it. But the rule that's actually being proposed here, let me say that, if you haven't heard, starting in the top of the 10th, starting right off the bat in extra innings, every half inning you're going to start with a runner on second base. I believe the rule is the runner is not going to be chosen by the team. It's not like the team can be like, hey, you go, we're going to make you our runner this inning. It's whoever was due up starts on second base, and then the guy right after that starts at the plate. That's how it's going to work. Now, let's say if the Orioles, Chris Davis was due up first, you would pinch run him. In that scenario, you would bring in, I don't know, one of your fast guys on the team. Hayes, I think he's pretty speedy, although he's probably already in the lineup. Somebody on your bench that's fast, you would put him in there, second base with no outs, and then at that point, your next... Really, it's probably going to end up looking like college football, with them trading scores back and forth until someone screws up, because, I mean, you're going to start with a runner on second with no outs. I would think your strategy at that point is just you're going to lay down a bunt, get him over there with one out, and then the next guy up just has to hit a sac fly. You know, I feel like that's going to be the base strategy, and then from there it's going to be which, pitching staff screws up first. Because starting with a runner on second, it's almost making it too easy to score.
Hey, the Orioles still play. I don't know how easy it'll be for them.
Right, but I think it'll be interesting to see how much this actually shortens games, because I feel like you're just going to the other end of the spectrum, where like under normal circumstances you can get into sort of a pitcher's duel or a bullpen duel in extra innings, and now you have this new rule change, and you're just going to have teams trading runs back and forth because it's so easy to score. But I'm against it in principle. Again, I understand it for 2020. I hope it's nowhere near the game moving forward in 2021. It's ridiculous. And the one other key thing here is that this is just for the regular season in 2020. Once we get to the postseason, it's not going to be a thing, thankfully.
Oh my God! If they ever instituted that in the postseason, that would be horrible.
Once we get to the postseason, it should be business as usual.
Yeah, I think that the rule makes sense in theory. I personally don't mind it at all during the regular season. I think I'd be really pissed about this if I were coaches and players, though. Like, can you imagine, like, Mike Trout hits a game-tying home run in the bottom of the 8th, and he's due up first in the bottom of the 10th, and he doesn't get to hit? Like, to me, that's stupid. Like, I think you should have to pick a player from your bench rather than, the next guy up goes to first base. Like, that sucks to me. Like, I didn't know that was part of the rule. And admittedly so, I follow this a little less than you do, but I think that's pretty dumb. Or let's say, think about all the great players that you'd want to see make a big play in extra innings. Like, I don't want to see the bat taken out of Christian Yelich's hands. I don't want to see the bat taken out of Mike Trout or Bryce Harper, Anthony Rendon, those types of guys. I don't want to see that happen in extra innings. Like, the walk-off home run from the star player is, like, one of very few things that are super exciting about baseball. Not that all walk-offs aren't fun, but when it's the right guy and the place goes nuts, now that'll be a little different this year too, but that's some of the best moments in baseball for me. So I don't like that it's just whoever is up next. I think that's kind of dumb, but the rule itself doesn't bother me quite as much as it does you.
I think the starting with whoever is due up on second is the most fair way to do it. I think it's if you got to pick and choose who you start on second base, I mean, again, you still do have a choice if you want a pinch run, but you're not going to do that for Mike Trout because you don't know how long the game's going to go. So yeah, I mean, it's disappointing. Like if you
might.
Well, if you're the home team and you have your work cut out for you, like let's say you're the bottom of the 10th and you know how many runs or maybe it's just one run, whatever it was scored in the top half of the inning, and you have your work cut out for you, then maybe you pinch run for Mike Trout. Although Mike Trout's not that slow, he's pretty speedy.
No, he's a 5-tool player. I mean, I don't think neither of us are implying
but
that. But
some big, power hitter that's a little slower.
Stanton or
Nelson Cruz, a DH, your DH guy. Someone like that's a threat to hit a home run every time they come up there, but is not particularly fast. I did have one last thing here. The process for screening in Major League Baseball. This is somewhat important. Players will be screened for temperature multiple times per day, tested for the coronavirus multiple times per week. Anyone testing positive will be immediately quarantined, I'm assuming a 2-week period, before they can be reevaluated. And 2 negative tests will be required for them to return. So those are the rules in place for testing, health protocols, and whatnot. The Players Union agreed upon that very quickly, surprisingly. They did not really waste too much time or complain too much, so they agreed pretty quickly. So, again, excited about this. I'm with you, Ian. The possibilities are endless, what could happen for the Orioles this year, and we will just have to sit here and hope that nothing terrible happens between now and then. But as we discussed last week, with the influx of players testing positive, not just in baseball, but in pretty much all professional sports, or a majority of them. I mean, we got a golfer, we had baseball, college football, it just NFL, it goes on and on and on. So
they said only 16 out of 302 NBA players tested positive. So I guess that's less than, I think they said it's around 5%.
But we ran into, one of the scenarios we talked about, one of your star players, Jokic. Right. I mean, and he's not even in the country. He can't get back. So he's stuck there until he can, get healthy and come back over. So we'll see if he's ready by late July. But yeah, let's move on. We spent a lot of time on baseball. Let's move on to this Ravens thing. Again, not too much to say about a lot of these, but I have it in front of me. I'm going to vote as we go. We'll start with quarterback. It's where it starts. This is the all-time team vote on the Ravens website. We'll put the link in the episode description, but it's not hard to find. I'm sure if you go to the Ravens website, it's right there on their homepage. But let's start with quarterback. We're picking just one. No backup vote. Vinny Testaverde, Joe Flacco, or Lamar Jackson. I think the debate here is just between Joe and Lamar. Lamar has not had the longest track record, but he does have the MVP. Joe has the longer track record and the Super Bowl. I'm going with Joe, just based on the longevity and the Super Bowl. I'm sure you feel the same way. Yeah,
I'm going with Joe. One thing I did want to put out there before we kept going, how are you reading this? Are you reading this as who is the best player at that position, or who is the greatest Raven at that position? Because I think those answers are different, right?
Yes, it's a good thing to, and the first thing that comes to mind is the safety position, because obviously Ed Reed's a lock. But beyond that, who your other safety is. Like Earl Thomas is going to be in the discussion. He's only been here for a year. Eric Weddle was here for 3 years.
Right.
There's a debate to be had of Rod Woodson.
I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page. Are we saying who's the best Ravens player at that position, or who's the greatest Raven ever at that position? Because I read it, greatest Raven ever at that position.
That's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to, if there was a guy that was only here for a year or two and he deserves it, I'll go with him. But for the most part, I'm going to value longevity.
Right. Because I think even, I'm a big a Joe guy as there is. Lamar Jackson's probably a better quarterback than Joe Flacco is.
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt.
His career will likely finish, so you will say Lamar Jackson was a better quarterback than Joe Flacco. But I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page. But yeah, I'd go with Joe.
Yeah, if you're celebrating, again, this is for celebrating the 25th anniversary of the team. You got to go with the guy that, again, not only got you the Super Bowl, but was there for how many years? 10?
11 years. The 11th year was the year he lost the job.
So there you go. Running backs are up next. We've got 4 to pick from. Can only choose one. I think it's an obvious choice, but I guess there's a debate to be had. Our options are Justin Forsett, Jamal Lewis, Willis McGahee, and Ray Rice. I think the debate is between Jamal Lewis and Ray Rice, but I'm going with Jamal Lewis.
Yeah, I'd say Jamal Lewis. And to be honest, Ray Rice maybe could have taken that crown had the incident never happened. I know that his game was kind of going downhill, at least it seemed that way when the incident happened. But yeah, overall, you've got to go with Jamal Lewis, and I think Ray Rice is a clear second, and then I'd probably go Willis McGahee there third. But as far as only voting for one, I think you've got to go with.
All right, we got fullback up next, and this one's actually tough.
They've got great fullbacks over the years. I actually did this too the other day. I think we got an email, season ticket holders, and I went and voted. But this is a great group of players.
So we have Vontae Leach, Pat Ricard, your current fullback, LaRon McClain, and Kyle Juszczyk. I ended up going with Vontae Leach, although I think you could make the case for any of these guys.
3 years for Vontae Leach in Baltimore, and he was an awesome fullback for them. And also 4 years for LaRon McClain. You remember LaRon McClain was a Pro Bowler one year. He rushed for 902 yards and 10 touchdowns. That was Joe's rookie year when they had three-headed monster at running back. McGahee, I want to say, I don't remember who the other guy was. And then LaRon McClain, or maybe it was just the two-headed monster. But I don't know, man. This one's really tough for me. Like, McClain had the best individual season of any of them when you factor in actually producing. But he may not have been the best blocking fullback. I don't remember what his talent was in that way. I'm going to go with Kyle Juszczyk. I think that's who I picked. He was a nice security blanket for Flacco for a while. Check down Flacco. Everybody loves to fucking make that joke. And a lot of those were to Kyle Juszczyk. And he was a great Raven. He got paid because of how good he was here, and he's still productive for San Francisco. So I'm going to go with Kyle Juszczyk. I don't think there's a bad choice here. Again, I think recency bias. People might vote for Project Pat, but one of the more talented fullback groups that any team can probably boast over the last 10 or 15 years.
Wide receivers is next. We can pick 2 from this group. Our options are Michael Jackson, throwing it back to the early days of the team, Anquan Bolden, Torrey Smith, Derek Mason, and Steve Smith Sr. So a good group of guys. I think I ended up going with Bolden and Steve Smith. This was tough because Torrey was here for 4 years, his rookie deal. Derek Mason came here from Tennessee, although he was here for a good chunk of years. Bolden was great in his time here, exceptional in the Super Bowl run, and Steve Smith was here for 3 years as well. So again, not the longest tenure for a lot of these guys. So I don't think you have any longevity bias here, but I went with Bolden and Steve Smith. I think those were the 2 most talented big play guys, although Derek Mason is very close.
So I think this is definitely. We're on different pages here. I went with Derek Mason and Torrey Smith. I think Derek Mason is probably the best wide receiver that ever played for the Ravens, and that includes, his tenure with the Ravens, his time with the Ravens. Anquan Boldin was really just kind of okay outside of the playoff run. Similar to Flacco, actually, when you look back and think about it. And Steve Smith Sr. only played like 2.5-ish seasons. And, I mean, he was good, but I'm not ranking him over Torrey Smith. I think career in Baltimore is pretty undervalued. If you do side-by-sides of Steve Smith Sr., Anquan Boldin, Derek Mason, and Torrey Smith, it's hard to pick out which player is which. When you look at yards per season, catches per season, and touchdowns. I know it's not all based on statistics, but for me, it's Torrey Smith and it's Derek Mason. Derek Mason, for me, is a lock. The other guys were great. Anquan Boldin and Steve Smith are probably the two greatest wide receivers to ever play for the Ravens when you factor in their entire careers. But for me, the Ravens' career alone, I've got to go with Derek Mason and Torrey Smith.
Yeah, I'd probably overlook Torrey Smith a little bit too much. Being a drafted guy, I think that's important. And he did. He had a really, really solid career here in Baltimore, and it was a debate when he went into free agency of whether they should keep him or not. I mean, there's a lot of people that would have liked for them to re-sign him and thought that he could be your number one guy, or at least your number two. But again, at that point, you're debating money and is it worth it? I think I still will stick with Steve Smith because while only here for a short amount of time, he's one of those guys that embodies a Raven, and you feel like he should have been a Raven his entire career.
Oh yeah, he's got the play like a Raven thing down pat. He's not a bad pick. I feel differently, and that's okay. We disagree on this show. Everybody knows that.
Next one here. This was a tough one. Tight end, and you can only pick one. Got Shannon Sharp here for the first Super Bowl. Todd Heap, he's got the longevity but no Super Bowl. Dennis Pitta, a good run, could have been a longer run, but the injuries unfortunately cut that short. And Mark Andrews, the current guy. So, I mean, Andrews, he just only 2 seasons, but we can see that the sky is the limit for him. I mean, the talent is there. But again, only 2 seasons going up against these 3 really great tight ends. So I'm going to go ahead and remove Mark Andrews from the debate for me. I went with Todd Heap for longevity. I mean, just we're talking about all-time great Ravens. I think it's I no discredit to Shannon Sharp, but I think to me it came down to between Todd Heap and Dennis Pitta, and I just had to go with Todd Heap because he was here for just such a long time and was very consistent throughout his entire time in Baltimore.
Yeah, I think I ended up going with Todd Heap as well. Shannon Sharp had 2 really, really good years in Baltimore, over 800 yards, and I think he had 5 touchdowns one year and 2 touchdowns the other year. 2 of the better tight end seasons that the Ravens have ever had. But I think Todd Heap's the guy. Just the longevity, for how long he was one of the only options, and for how many times freaking Kyle Bowler got that kid laid out. Like, I feel like Todd Heap got smoked like every other game. I feel like he was dead. He'd always come down with the ball, and then he'd eventually get up. Like, I don't know.
Next up is offensive tackles. We can pick 2 here. We have 4 to pick from, and 1 is a lock. Jonathan Ogden, there's no question about it. He's a lock. Hall of Famer. No debate to be had. So now we're picking from 3 for our other tackle, and you can pick from Ronnie Stanley, your current left tackle, Michael Orr, and Orlando Brown Jr., oddly enough, another current guy. So I went with Ronnie Stanley. Just, again, we're having the debate with Stanley right now about do you pay him. I think there's no doubt that he is one of the top 3 tackles in the league, if not the best. So I think you go with him. And Michael Orr was not that great. I mean, he was here for a while, but a great story with Michael Orr. Had a nice, lengthy NFL career in the grand scheme of things, and won a Super Bowl with the Ravens. So I went with Stanley though. I mean, just he's too good.
Yeah, I think that these two are like this was one of the easier ones. Maybe if you're thinking, hey, which one of these guys is going to play right tackle, maybe you'd pick Michael Orr. Michael Orr, I think, was much better overall as a player than he got credit for. He was a terrible left tackle. Terrible. He was okay at right tackle, mostly good enough to get by. But if you're just picking the two best tackles in team history, I think you've got to go with Jonathan Ogden and Ronnie Stanley. Honorable mention for me, Bryant McKinney. He was a clown, and Harbaugh couldn't stand him, but he came in like off the bench and basically like was flawless in the playoffs the year the Ravens won the Super Bowl. So obviously he wouldn't make this, the final four of this list, but his impact on that 2012 Super Bowl team can't be denied.
All right, sticking with the offensive line, we've got guards. You can pick two again. Marshall Yanda is your one lock. And from there, we are picking between Kelechi Osemele, Ben Grubbs, and Edwin Mulatalo. I think I went with Ben Grubbs here, although I don't remember enough about Edwin to have the debate there. But I did go with Marshall Yanda and Ben Grubbs.
Yeah, I think that was who I went with as well. Kelechi Osemele was really good. Mulatalo was here for the first Super Bowl in several years after, kind of a fan favorite type of guy. More of a fan favorite than a good player. But we see that all the time, right? I think that's part of being a fan. I went with Ben Grubbs.
Next up is center. We're picking between two guys here, Matt Burke or Mike Flynn. I went with Matt Burke. I don't know. Can we have the debate here?
Yeah, I mean, how do you really judge center play? Like, it's not an easy one. It's not something that sticks out to you. Both players were really good. I think I went with Matt Burke as well.
Next up, we're going to the defensive side of the ball. We have defensive end. Pick one from this group of three, Michael McCrary, Trevor Price, and Rob Burnett. I think this is pretty easy. As much as I like Trevor Price, I think you have to go with Michael McCrary. Very high up. I think third on the all-time sack leaders list for the Ravens, behind Terrell Suggs, and I think Ray might have got in there just because he played here for so long. So, but McCrary in a 4-year span, a 3-year span, he was a beast as a defensive end for the Ravens. So I went with him.
Yeah, I think this one's kind of tough, right? I mean, Trevor Price had a 13 sack season in Baltimore. Mm-hmm. Golly, I mean, that's a big time year. He finished with 26 sacks, 33 tackles for loss over his career in Baltimore. And I think it's tough it's definitely between him and McCrary. I don't remember who I picked. But looking back on it, I mean, McCrary just has way better numbers in Baltimore.
All right, here's a debate to be had. Defensive tackles. Pick two from this group. Kelly Gregg, Haloti Ngata, Tony Siragusa, Sam Adams, and Brandon Williams.
This is one of the harder ones for sure.
I think Ngata's got to be a lock.
I agree with that. I definitely picked him.
So then from there, you got Kelly Gregg, was here for a very long time, very solid. Tony Siragusa, who might be more of a fan favorite, and you could say he might be better than Kelly Gregg, but was not here as long. But he was such a big personality and part of the Super Bowl team.
And he ate Rich Gannon once.
Exactly. Sam Adams, another big boy from that 2000 defense. And then Brandon Williams, who's building quite the longevity here as a current guy on the team. And I would say a very solid career so far for Brandon Williams. But I think I can't remember who I picked. I think I went with Kelly Gregg.
So did I, but that's just because I loved Kelly Gregg. Yeah. The guy had no neck. He looked like a fire hydrant. I loved him.
This is one of those where I very, very much am valuing the longevity here. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good pick. When you got Haloti Ngata and Kelly Gregg, I don't think you can argue against that.
It's so hard though, because Sam Adams and Tony Siragusa were like it's hard to call them the driving force, but like that rush defense was so good because you couldn't move those two guys. The anchors, I guess you could call them, of the greatest defense of all time. But I think overall, when you look at the careers, I think Kelly Gregg and Haloti Ngata are probably the correct picks. Brandon Williams is a guy that's really controversial among Ravens fans. Some people think he's great. Some people think he's terrible. Most people think he's overpaid.
All right, well, if you thought that was tough, outside linebacker, probably even tougher. Picking two from this group. Yeah, Matt Judon in here for some reason. No offense. Terrell Suggs, Peter Boulware, Adalius Thomas, Elvis Dumerville, and Jarrett Johnson. Terrell Suggs is a lock. And from there, I think I went with Jarrett Johnson. Longevity, an Iron Man. Took him, I don't think he missed a start as a Raven, or it took him up until one of his later years as a Raven to miss a start. Just a very, very solid guy and a great compliment to play on the other end of the defensive line, where you have Terrell Suggs wreaking havoc on one side and Jarrett Johnson not really being the pass rush threat, but you don't want to run to the other side either because Jarrett Johnson was just a monster setting the edge and all that. So I went with those two guys, played at the same time. I think that factored in. But, I mean, Adalius Thomas was very good. Peter Boulware in the early days was very good. And Elvis Dumerville, not here the longest, but he put up some big numbers in his time here.
To me, Jarrett Johnson, really good player, really good run defender. But when I'm talking about defensive ends, I'm trying to get to the quarterback. And that wasn't really what he did. So for me, it's Suggs and Boulware. But Jarrett Johnson, hell of a player. Just kind of a more well-balanced, jack-of-all-trades kind of guy than a pass rusher specifically.
All right, inside linebacker, we're picking two. Ray is going to be one of them. Let's just start there. And then you're picking who's going to play next to him. Is it Jamie Sharper in the Super Bowl? Bart Scott from those mid-2000 years? Or C.J. Mosley, who did not play alongside Ray, but was his successor as the leader at the middle linebacker position? I think, again, I might be overlooking Jamie Sharper, but I think it's between Bart Scott and C.J. Mosley. And I don't know. I think I went with Bart Scott, but honestly, that might be disrespectful to C.J. Mosley. I'm not really sure.
I think for my other pick, I went with Bart Scott. Bart Scott, he's one of the guys, and the reason I would go with Bart Scott is he's one of the guys that played next to Ray Lewis that was still really good when they weren't playing next to Ray Lewis. That, to me, is a deciding factor. Jamie Sharper faded to black in Houston. I think that's where he ended up. And C.J. Mosley, we don't know what he is outside of the Ravens. He was hurt last year and never played with Ray. But C.J. Mosley was a good, or not C.J. Mosley, Bart Scott was a good player for the Jets as well. So, for me, it's Bart Scott and Ray Lewis.
All right, next up here is cornerbacks. You can pick two from this group. Dwayne Starks, Chris McAllister, Marcus Peters, for some reason, Lardarius Webb, Jimmy Smith, and Marlon Humphrey, who, again, not here the longest, but he has had a very impressive 3 years so far. I went with Chris McAllister, and I think I picked Humphrey, but I'm such a big fan of him. It should honestly be between Webb and Smith.
It's your list. You don't have to talk yourself out of who you pick.
You know what? I'm going to switch. I'm going to switch to Lardarius Webb. Here much longer, although he did kind of fade in the later years. Still a valuable defensive player, and in his prime as a corner, very, very good. So I'll go with Chris McAllister and Lardarius Webb.
For me, it's Jimmy Smith. He was a big part of the Super Bowl team. Last couple plays of the game, he made them. And he was just a really good lockdown corner for many, many years here. Did a great job with Antonio Brown over the years. But the injuries kind of killed him.
All right, safeties. Who's going next to Ed Reed? That's the question. You can pick from Eric Turner, Rod Woodson, Earl Thomas, DeJuan Landry, and Eric Weddle. I'm cutting Earl Thomas out of this conversation. He's only been here for a year.
and it wasn't a great one, in my opinion.
Eric Turner, I don't know enough about, but I don't think he was here that long. And DeJuan Landry played alongside Ed Reed for a while. But so I guess I think I went with Rod Woodson, although not here the longest, but a big part of the Super Bowl team, a legendary defensive player, even though his better years were with Pittsburgh. I think I still went with him, and that might just be because I'm so against Eric Weddle, but I think you could make the case for Eric Weddle here.
Hold on to your hats, Nolan McGraw. I picked Eric Weddle to play with Ed Reed. And we have spent so much time trashing Eric Weddle on this podcast, but he had a really, really good year, an okay year, and a really, really bad year. I think Rod Woodson would be your other choice here. DeJuan Landry was kind of just okay for me. He was never all that special. So I went with Eric Weddle. I know this is going to shock many, but I think he's the second best option there.
All right, let's round this out with special teams. Starting with kicker, I mean, there is a debate to be had here. It's between Justin Tucker and Matt Stover. I got to show Matt Stover the respect he deserves and say that this is a debate. I'm going with Justin Tucker. I mean, he's been regarded as the best kicker in NFL history for so long. He's just continues to get it done time and time again. When he does mess up, like when he missed the extra point against the Saints 2 years ago, it was made into an even bigger deal than it probably should have been just because he never misses. So, yeah, I think you go with Tucker, but Matt Stover, a very, very good kicker for a very long time with the Ravens.
And Matt Stover was the offense for 5 weeks during the scoring drought that the Ravens had. I think he actually might be, and I'd have to check it, it's him or Justin Tucker, the leading scorer in Ravens history. But yeah, you got to go with Justin Tucker here. He is, as you said, I think he's the greatest kicker ever already. If he continues to, progress, I mean, how can he progress? When you really step aside and think about how good that guy is and how undervalued kickers are, because I got into it with somebody, I think it was Pete Prisco, released his top 100 NFL players, and Justin Tucker wasn't on the list. I'm sorry, I know he's a kicker, but you can't tell me he's not one of the 100 best players in the NFL.
Yeah, on talent alone.
So I think that puts him on the list. But yeah, he's the best. Again, like you said, you don't want to, undermine Matt Stover. He was fantastic.
All right, next up is punter. I think this is easily Sam Cook, but your other options are Kyle Richardson and Dave Zastudil. I'm a huge loser. I was nerding out hard when they started putting the long snapper or something. Why do I know these guys' names? I'm such a nerd. But yeah, we're going with Sam Cook, right?
I think I picked Sam Cook, but Dave Zastudil was pretty good too. I don't remember a ton about who was the other guy?
Kyle Richardson.
No, Kyle Richardson was the one that was pretty good. I don't remember a ton about Zastudil. I will say this about Sam Cook, and this is a different conversation for a different day. Sam Cook's overrated by Ravens fans. He's a good punter. He's no longer an elite punter. I'm not sure he ever was. I think he had a few great years. But right now, he's just kind of decent at best.
I disagree.
That's fine.
We'll leave it at that. Long snapper. I think this is the last one. Morgan Cox, your current guy, been here forever as part of the Wolfpack. Joe Macy, and Matt Catula. I remember Matt Catula. Do not remember Joe. But I went with Morgan Cox. I got to keep the Wolfpack together for the all-time team.
Yeah, I think I picked Morgan Cox too. I mean, how much do you really know about a long snapper? But I did know the names. I remember Matt Catula and Joe Macy. But I think I went with Morgan Cox again with the Wolfpack connection. The one thing that they didn't put on there, and I'll just add this in, we'll cover it quickly and then we'll get out of here, but greatest coach in team history. You got to think John Harbaugh, Brian Billick.
Yeah, it's between those two. They both have one Super Bowl. I'm biased. I'm going with the recency here. And I do genuinely believe that he's a better coach, but I'm going to go with Harbaugh.
Yeah, I'm going with Harbaugh as well. I wonder if some of the older fan guard would lean Billick here. Harbaugh did such a good job coming in here with a rookie quarterback and all the adversity that came with it. Look at all that the team had to overcome. And look at, when the Ravens don't have a ton of talent, they're always in it. So I think that's a testament to Harbaugh and how good he is at the non-X's and O's parts of being a head coach. Some people devalue that. I think it's arguably as important as the X's and O's is to be able to be a leader of men, as they call it. So I think it's Harbaugh, but just wanted to throw that one in there as well.
And there was, I forgot about this one. There was one last one. Kick returner. You can pick between Jacoby Jones and Jermaine Lewis. So dueling Super Bowls here.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. I went with Jacoby Jones. I mean, that postseason run was magical. I know the Mile High Miracle, he was not returning a kick, but I think it's creeping into my memory. But he did have plenty of amazing kick returns throughout that entire 2012 season. I mean, what did he have? There's one against the Steelers, one against the Cowboys that I can remember. And then obviously in the postseason, the Super Bowl, the one to open up the second half, that was just what a moment that was. They would,
But both those guys were great, pivotal parts to what both Super Bowl teams did. Lewis, from an emotional state, I don't know if you've seen the America's Game when his son passed away. That was a very come-together moment for that group. And like you said, Jacoby, I mean, he's responsible for arguably the greatest play in franchise history. Another top 10 play in franchise history would probably be the return in the Super Bowl as well. And he caught the bomb in the Super Bowl. You could argue Jacoby could have won the MVP in the Super Bowl, but they always give it to the quarterback, and I love my boy.
No, everyone brings that up, and it's mostly the Flacco detractors that bring it up. But I'm not gonna, undermine what Jacoby did, because obviously he had a terrific game, and it's between, if you're gonna have a debate, it's between him and Joe for the Super Bowl.
Right.
And I know the MVP is supposed to be just for the Super Bowl game, but after the run that Joe had in that postseason, you can't give it to anyone else. And it's
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Flacco threw the one pass as far as he could. Jacoby had to come back for it, got up, juked two guys out of their underwear, and then ran it into the house. Like, he was a blast too. Like, I'm a big fan of big personalities.
All right, well, that's gonna do it for episode 108. Again, I will remind you, Thursday evening, 6 p.m., The Mo Show on 105.7 The Fan. Check it out if you can. It's going to be great. I'm so excited for it. I mean, the guests are going to start rolling in here. I know on social media there's been people tagging, athletes, celebrities, trying to get them in on this, and I'm sure we're going to have plenty that do join in. Plenty of people that have already reached out to Mo either in the past couple weeks or over the past couple years, and at the very least plenty of local Ravens, Orioles guys, stuff like that we all know and love. And as I said, just based on the two guests that I've already got written down and penciled into a specific time, you're not going to want to miss it. So it's only going to get bigger and better. And yeah, check that out. Thursday, July 2nd at 6 p.m., 6 to 9 p.m. on The Fan. If you can't listen on the radio, radio.com app, wherever you can listen, check it out. And yeah, we'll talk to you next week, and we'll have hopefully maybe an MLB schedule. We'll know who the Orioles taxi squad is, I think, and anything else that happens, we'll see. Hopefully no other coronavirus blow-ups, positive tests. We'll talk to you then. Thanks for listening.